Hello, everyone. Today, we welcome you for our podcast series, From and for the Battlefield. I am Manish Jaswal, Research Assistant, CENJOWS. And today, we have Professor Rahul Tripathi, who will be delivering this podcast on the title of Neo-mercantilist Warfare as a tool for the strategic power in South Asia. Professor Rahul Tripathi is a professor of political science at D.D. Kushambi School of Social Sciences and Behavioral Studies, Goa University. He has been teaching and conducting research since the from 2000s. His teaching and supervision span international relations, India's foreign policy, international political economy, South Asian politics, and human rights. He has guided numerous postgraduates and doctoral researchers. Professor Tripathi has served in several academic institutions and administrative leadership roles. He has also been visiting faculty at Nihon University, Japan, and adjunct faculty at Naval War College, Goa. His research focuses on international political economy, regional cooperation in South Asia, and India's foreign policy. He has authored and edited books, namely Monetary and Payments Cooperation in South Asia and Towards Freedom in South Asia, Democratization, Peace, and Regional Cooperation. His popular writings have been appeared in leading newspapers like Indian Express, Times of India, The Mint. He has been interviewed by BBC, Bloomberg, Rajya Sabha TV, and so the first question we will be asking you, sir, is what is neo-mercantilist warfare and how does it differ from traditional military conflict?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here. Uh, Always a pleasure to be at CENJOWS. Also, thanks for selecting this theme on neo-mercantilism as a tool for warfare, particularly identifying South Asia as the domain. Uh, how do we look at mercantilism in the first instance? It's better to look at before we move into neo-mercantilism and its implications as far as South Asia is concerned. Uh, Power and wealth have always been seen as intricately linked with each other. Historically, nations have always competed for power and influence across subcontinents. And when we talk about the colonial era, the military means were often used as instruments to acquire wealth abroad. So the flag follows the ship used to be the common dictum. So trade and pursuit of military power used to go side by side. And that was the architecture on which the entire colonial enterprise was based. When we talk about neo-mercantilist uh, framework and the manner in which now it is affecting the world, the fundamental equation remains the same. Pursuit of power and pursuit of wealth on part of nations. And here I'm talking about bigger powers remains a fundamental feature as far as international relations is concerned. What has changed is basically the instruments and the means used to pursue power. Of course, military is an inseparable component of exercise of power, but technology now is playing an increasingly important role in the pursuit of that power. So, if you ask my interpretation of neo-mercantilism, basically it's the way nations are using their enhanced military and technological capability to acquire greater spheres of economic influence across the world. South Asia being no exception to that extent.
Thank you, sir, for explaining what is neo-mercantilism and the conceptual framework. The second question on which I'll be asking Why has neo-mercantilism become an important tool for exercising strategic power in 21st century?
Uh, when we look at the 21st century, it's a general supposition that the conflicts that we are going to see are going to be structured more around the resources. Uh, so the 20th century was seen as a domain where conflicts and rivalries were structured around oil as a very significant resource. Uh, Energy security remains a very, very important concern as far as the coming period is concerned. Uh, Climate change concerns as they are unfolding also remain very, very vital. And when you look at these issues in totality, the role of technology either to gain predominant military influence, but also to explore alternative resources become very, very vital. So it is in that context, uh, I think there is a kind of a resurgence of neo-mercantilist thinking in contemporary international affairs. What makes it all the more significant is that the post Second World War institutions that we used to think are going to determine the stable planks for international negotiations, international norms, are also coming to a certain uh, are going to be subject to a certain unstable framework. So, because of all this, the international situation is in a state of flux, and therefore, on part of bigger powers, neo mercantilism is making a kind of a re-entry. It is becoming more and more significant, which we see as manifesting in the actions and outcomes on part of individual powers.
Thank you, sir, for your answers and explaining the economic instruments and strategic power. The third question, we are moving towards the strategies pushed by states. Says, how is new mercantilist warfare manifesting in South Asia through trade policies, debt diplomacy, infrastructure projects, or resource control?
So I'm glad that you picked out on these, for example, as a domain where neo-mercantilist behavior is reflecting more and more. At a more fundamental level, neo-mercantilism is all about enhancing one's economic interests by using the power that one has at its stake. The four areas that you mentioned, trade, debt, diplomacy, uh, multilateral aid, energy security, all these things, if you look at it, uh, have been framed in a very, very conventional North-South framework as far as South Asian countries are concerned. In all these areas, the concerns and the anxieties that the South Asian countries have are very similar. I'll just take one example here, the example of trade. Being part of the larger group of developing countries, which you can also call as Global South, there are a lot of commonalities with regard to the trade interests that the South Asian countries have. Most of these countries are agricultural based uh, exporting commodities. They specialize in agricultural commodities when it comes to their trade, whereas agricultural trade at the global level is becoming more and more protected. The very heavily subsidized nature of agricultural trade at the global level is creating a situation which is indeed very, very difficult for the South Asian countries to be able to continue have a certain exposure as far as their agricultural exposure is. In that context, when something like uh, tariffs imposed by the Trump regime come in, which are apparently at a very, very universal level, not keeping in mind that the developing countries for whom agricultural trade is the most important component needs to be subsidized, automatically puts the agricultural producers in these countries to significant risk. Apparently, the objective of Trump tariffs would be to make sure that the American agricultural exports and producers get their deal. But in that process, the South Asian farmers get affected. So, so the US using its political clout to impose tariffs, and thereby talking about enhancing economic interests of the US farmers, comes an example of this point. You can use similar things when it comes to trade, uh, multilateral aid, and also technology transfer. So I just gave agriculture as one example here.
Whenever we talk about these strategies like diplomacy, trade warfare, trade, um, and tariffs, there's always some actors, some states. Today we are talking about South Asia. So my next question will be regarding which are the states in South Asia or abroad which are using neo-mercantilist strategies most effectively and how?
So here I would not talk about as much about states in South Asia, because if we talk about uh, the story of South Asia within, unfortunately, intra-regional linkages within South Asia in economic terms have not been so strong for nations to actually start acting as neo-mercantilists within. Uh, so whenever we used to talk about South Asian cooperation or South Asian free trade area, the whole logic was that there should be a certain give and take between countries depending on their respective capabilities, so that a certain enhancement of intra-regional trade can happen. So these actors are not so much within South Asia, because the region hardly is integrated economically that way, but actors outside. And when we talk about actors outside South Asia, uh, the one example that comes to my mind immediately, uh, whether China is acting as a neo-mercantile power as far as the South Asian region is concerned. Uh, I would say partially. It can certainly be seen as a neo-mercantile power as far as Southeast Asia is concerned, because of the threats that it's posing as far as South China Sea is concerned, trying to exercise its dominance as far as maritime routes are concerned. Uh, but within South Asia, it is more a kind of a lateral actor with the underpinnings of what precisely is a neo-mercantile reasoning. How that is happening. When you look at individual South Asian countries, with almost all the countries, it has a trade surplus, which is a given fact. Nobody can question that. The scale and size of the Chinese economy and the other economies, if you look at it, trade imbalance is bound to happen. The problem emerges when China starts using its uh, superior uh, political capability, its political power, to somewhere down the line convince and coerce South Asian countries to accept economic arrangements, particularly economic infrastructural arrangements, which certainly are going to benefit China in some way or the other, but also apparently seem to have certain benefits for the concerned South Asian countries. So the Belt and Road Initiative, to the extent it has a South Asian component, China-Pakistan economic corridor, all are important infrastructural ventures which China is trying to dig deep into these South Asian countries. But then there have been very strong linkages in terms of the tied nature of this assistance that is coming in. So the hands of these countries which are going in for this kind of aid or infrastructural development become deeply tied. And therein comes the element of a lateral neo-mercantilist approach that if we are helping you out with this, these are the conditions on which we have to agree. Uh, Sri Lanka as a country already saw what happened when those unviable projects that it had undertaken with those Chinese help that did not deliver. So it can lead to therefore coercive debt diplomacy. So all these things taken together, I think are examples which are manifesting emergence of neo-mercantilist tendencies uh, by external states and affecting South Asia more specifically. So when I talk about these actors, it's not actors within South Asia, but factors which are external to South Asia. And Chinese expansion in South Asia does appear to be the initial steps in that direction.
Sir, as you delve into the China and its strategies in the South Asia, we all have seen the China brought different policies and sending their troops in the as a workers in the South Asia. But here the question comes about the smaller states which are unable to compete and can't deny their wishes to. So, what are the impacts of neo-mercantilist competition on the smallest South Asian states? Are they making them gaining their leverage or making them vulnerable?
My personal opinion is that relying on one player alone or one power alone is always likely to make any country vulnerable. So, as it is generally said, that it's always better to have your options cross a multiple spectrum. You cannot have all your eggs in the same basket. Uh, by engaging only specifically with China or exclusively with China, I personally believe that the dominance dependence syndrome, for which the Chinese are known for, uh, will only aggravate the matters as far as Asian countries are concerned. So they might become over dependent on the funds which are coming in from China, which are not free, which are again tied to a certain rate of interest. There have to be certain deliverables, and if they are not able to deliver, the uh, debt issues get further protracted. But this I'm talking only about the economic side. There is a very strong political side to it as well. Chinese projects and the Chinese personnel, as you talked about now, many places are seen as infringing on domestic customs, cultures. So, in my view, over dependence on a single country or over dependence on China, in that sense, will accentuate the spirit of neo-mercantilism. If we have to look at it from a small country perspective, I think a diversification of options is very much needed to look into what other countries also have to offer in more specific terms, rather than relying only on China. So this competitive dimension, therefore, has to be understood from that perspective.
So, whenever we talk about the new challenges and opportunities which are have to come in future, what are the future scenarios do you foresee? Will new mercantilist warfare intensify in the South Asia or the foreign countries, or it will stabilize or transform into open geopolitical conflict in South Asia?
Well, the way I look at the situation unfolding as of now, as we are talking, I cannot but assume escalation of this conflict as it is going on. When we were talking about, say, 15 or 20 years back, the golden age of globalization, it appeared that all the economies are going to be intricately linked with each other. Interdependence will be there. Uh, Globalization through multilateral institutions would offer means and instruments of collective growth for all together. So if I compare that scenario, it was there 20 years back to the contemporary scenario, I think there has been a very significant uh, transition or transformation because of a variety of reasons. One such reason being that globalization itself was not able to deliver across all spectrums of the society, across all countries in a fair manner. The anxieties that crept in have led to a situation where uh, countries are becoming more and more assertive in terms of emphasizing on their national policy autonomy. So there is a greater nationalist assertion, which is also translating into greater economic assertion. Now, the more there is this economic assertion across, uh, we talk about greater exports to other countries, lesser imports from other countries, less dependence on other countries, that is likely to intensify the competition because then there will be too many countries competing for power in the strongest Indian domain. So, what is happening insofar as Trump's foreign economic policy is concerned, many scholars have argued is kind of a mercantilism of the 21st century. Already, I mean, there is an element of neo-mercantilist warfare which is being unleashed. Uh, what remains to be seen is that what is going to be the counter reaction or response of powers like China. Yes. So in that sense, I mean, the competition, the conflict, the rivalry of competing powers in the new mercantilist phase is very much a potential reality or possibility which we cannot ignore, which a country like India cannot ignore.
Thank you, sir, for explaining the idea of neo-mercantilism warfare, its implication in South Asia, and its actors. With that, we will end our podcast here. I, Manish Jaswal, thank our listeners of the podcast and will request to follow, like, and subscribe our YouTube channel at CENJOWS. Thank you.
Thank you.